Good morning, distinguished delegates. Please take your seats. We're about to begin.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, welcome to the opening of the resumed high-level segment on the occasion of the 29th century of the Conference of the Parties, the 19th session of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol, and the 6th session of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. Please note there is only one national statement. Parties whose head of state of government has already delivered a national statement during the first part of the high-level segment on 12th and 13th of November will not be able to make another national statement. Dear colleagues, as we commence the national statements, I would like to remind representatives of the measures in place for effective time management, specifically the 3-minute time limit for national statements during the high-level segment. Statements on behalf of negotiating groups should not exceed 5 minutes. I would like to point out that an electronic device will be used to mark the 3-minute time allotted to national statements and 5 minutes time for group statements. Speakers are strongly encouraged to ensure their statements do not exceed allotted time. Statements should be as concise as possible, as the full text will be made available on the UNFCCC website. Speaking slots for those not presented in the plenary during their scheduled delivery time will be moved to the end of all statements within the same category. The session will conclude at 13. Statements that have not been delivered by 13 will be moved to the afternoon session. Dear colleagues, let us begin. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Surangel Samuel Wips, President of Palau. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Ali and warm greetings from Palau. Your Excellency, President Ilham Alibes, I want to thank you for the incredible hospitality you and your people have extended to our team during this COP, and for your leadership and support in addressing challenges small island states have. Palau, like many small island countries, is already living with the impacts of climate change. We talk about invasions, acts of piracy, and terrorism that threaten global peace and stability. I come here to tell you that climate change is already invading our islands and threatening our food security, our infrastructure, our economy, our culture, and our very existence. The new collective quantified goal on climate finance represents our joint commitment to addressing the climate crisis equitably and effectively. The NCQG must ensure that finance is easily accessible and sufficient to meet our adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage needs. The actions we take from this day forward are vital to our survival. There's a Palauan legend of a man from Uramai who, while fishing, dove into the water after a turtle, only to realize that he had failed to anchor his boat. Seeing his boat drifting away, he couldn't decide whether to go after the boat or the turtle. Caught in indecision, he lost both his boat and the turtle. We must make decisions and we must act. Our planet and our people depend on it. We call on the global community to reaffirm our collective agreement in Paris to stay below 1.5. Palau has taken significant strides in its mitigation efforts by prioritizing renewable energy, implementing nature-based solutions, and fostering community resilience to combat climate challenges. We call on industrialized nations to escalate the phasing out of fossil fuels. Palau recognizes the vital link between ocean and climate, and the ocean bears the brunt of the climate impacts caused by greenhouse gases. Here in Azerbaijan, you are suffering from sea levels that are receding. In Palau and the Southwest Pacific, sea levels are rising faster than other areas of the world. Sea surface temperatures have risen 3 times faster than the global average since 1980, and marine heat waves have doubled in frequency and are more intense and longer. Our stingless jellyfish are disappearing, and our corals are bleaching, and our fish population is declining, all due to our addiction to fossil fuels. We must prioritize the ocean climate nexus by advancing our sustainable ocean economies, marine conservation, and resilient coastal ecosystems. Palau seeks additional partnerships in unlocking the Blue Pacific Prosperity Plan that was launched at COP29, which invests in blue priorities such as food security, sustainable fisheries, and coral reef protection and coastal defenses. By supporting blue economies and protecting the marine resources, we safeguard our island communities, contribute to the global climate goals, and vital biodiversity preservation. It is imperative that all countries are part of the climate solutions. Taiwan must be recognized for its global climate efforts and contributions to the outcomes of the Paris Agreement. By officially acknowledging Taiwan's efforts, we can have a better understanding of our collective efforts. The 23 million people of Taiwan must be included in solving the climate crisis. We stand ready to work along all nations, fostering collaboration that respects our shared future and honors our commitment to the Paris Agreement. Together, let us act decisively to safeguard the livelihoods and cultures of SIDS and protect the planet we call home. I very much hope we can therefore leave Baku with a decision on Australia's bid to co-host COP31 in partnership with the Pacific, and for those involved in this decision to not deny the Pacific this rare opportunity to help host what is the most important international forum for our future. Thank you. Koman Sulang.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Biman Chand Prasad, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of Fiji. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Bula Vinaka and Namaste. The Paris Agreement stands not only to protect the most vulnerable, but also to protect productivity, security, and shared prosperity. Without it, without solidarity, a much more difficult transition is required. The transition to protectionism, the transition away from multilateralism, and the transition to an every man and woman for his or herself world. Let me be very clear. We need to raise the bar, lock in the basis for Paris and 1.5-degree aligned 2025 NDCs, and secure an NCQG which is evidence-based and recognizes the specific needs of small island development states and LDCs. Keeping global average temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius is not a loose policy slogan. It is not open to subjective interpretation. It is the science of survival, and it is the core of the multilateral effort we represent here. With this in mind, the centrality of 1.5 degrees Celsius target is unavoidable. The new collective codified goal we must set here in Baku is a proxy for understanding whether the requisite commitment to achieving this target exists. If here at COP29 we do not put in place the financial fundamentals for the transition that our 2025 NDCs must enable, the world will know that despite years of effort, we have lost sight of the horizon. The public will know that the current political storms and uncertain waters have beaten back our leadership at a time where reassurance and hope is needed more than ever. We cannot allow that. The world needs 1.3 trillion to deliver 1.5 degrees. The alternative is the burden of tens of trillions in loss, damage, and costs over the next decade in an unstable and dangerous +3 degree world. The beauty here is the better scenario comes at a tenth of the cost. The reality of the situation is that 1.3 trillion pales in the face of the 7 trillion that is spent annually on fossil fuel subsidies. The money is there. It is just in exactly the wrong place. I hope leaders have the ability to spot a bargain, to understand a win-win when presented with it, and to recognize the social and economic, environmental, and political costs of perpetuating fossil fuels far exceed the benefit. Excellencies, as a Minister of Finance myself, I have no appetite for bad maths, no intent to accept creative accounting. Excellencies, we must deliver stability and deliver it now. The cost of carbon eclipses any semblance of credible economic rationale for keeping fossil fuels in play. Excellencies, all our names and flags are on the record, and this record will not be forgotten. It will instead be analyzed word for word by future generations whose reality you are determining and shaping today. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Sophie Hermans, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Climate Policy and Green Growth of the Kingdom of Netherlands. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, we are gathering amidst an increasingly alarming climate reality. It's too wet, too dry, and too polluted. The struggle against water, which has defined the history of the Netherlands, is taking on new forms in both the European and the Caribbean parts of our kingdom. In the Netherlands, we overcame our struggle against water by working together, shoulder to shoulder. Across the world, we can do the same. If we want to turn the tide on climate change, we have to stand together. And we can, if everybody does what is needed and what has been agreed. And I want to assure you, the Netherlands stands ready to help, to deliver what has been agreed, even if it's difficult. And to discuss this with each other in all transparency. Ladies and gentlemen, our history with water gives me hope when I look to the future. And yes, we will have to prepare, adapt. But climate adaptation is nothing new to us. And the knowledge and expertise that we have, we share. We share it when it comes to water management and drinking water, to offshore wind and green hydrogen. And we share our financial innovations too. Dutch pension funds now invest in climate action beyond our borders. Amsterdam-based asset manager ILX grows climate investments funds by matching public and private funding. Last week, here at COP, they announced an increase of their total fund to $1.7 billion. It's precisely these kinds of examples that give me hope. The EU has been a steadfast donor, and so are we. The Netherlands currently delivers 1.8 billion euros of climate finance per year, public and private. Of our public climate finance, 60% goes to adaptation, grant-based and geared towards the most vulnerable. Finally, we are spearheading an international coalition to deliver on the promise made since COP26, to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. I encourage you all to join us and take the next step in increasing transparency, identifying barriers, and take national action. Ladies and gentlemen, to scale up our collective efforts, we need everyone, including the market, especially the market, considering the scale of the challenge. We know that every challenge presents an opportunity. Opportunities for today, but especially for generations of the future. We are at a turning point, the point where we must seize the opportunity to turn the tides. And if there's one constant in history, it's that humanity always finds a way out when we face major challenges. Always. And I'm convinced we can do it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Abdoulaye Maïga, Minister of State and Government spokesperson of Mali. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Monsieur le secrétaire général de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, Monsieur le président de la conférence des partis, Monsieur le secrétaire exécutif de la conférence de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur le changement climatique, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs, à l'entame de mes propos, permettez-moi de féliciter chaleureusement la présidence de la COP29 ainsi que le peuple et le gouvernement de la République d'Azerbaïdjan pour l'organisation exemplaire de cette conférence des partis. Je tiens également à vous transmettre les chaleureuses salutations de son Excellence, le général d'armée Assimi Goïta, président de la transition, chef de l'État de la République du Mali, du peuple et du gouvernement malien, profondément engagés en faveur de la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Mesdames et Messieurs, le Mali, comme tant d'autres nations, est confronté de manière aiguë aux effets néfastes des changements climatiques qui compromettent non seulement notre environnement, mais également notre stabilité socio-économique. Les impacts désastreux des inondations récurrentes que nous avons connues cette année ont provoqué des pertes en vies humaines, des dégâts matériels, ainsi que la dégradation de certaines infrastructures de base, poussant le gouvernement à adopter le 23 août 2024 un décret déclarant l'état de catastrophe nationale et des actions urgentes en faveur des victimes. En effet, ces phénomènes environnementaux ne cessent d'amplifier les pertes et préjudices auxquels nos populations sont malheureusement confrontées, réduisant considérablement notre capacité à répondre efficacement aux urgences climatiques. C'est dans ce contexte que la COP29 intervient à un moment critique où le monde se trouve à la croisée des chemins. Plus que jamais, il est impératif de traduire les nombreuses promesses des sommets mondiaux en actions concrètes et bénéfiques pour les populations. Le Mali, État couvrant une superficie d'1 241 238 km², avec 2/3 de son territoire désertique, subit durement les effets du réchauffement climatique, notamment la perturbation des cycles pluviométriques, la fréquence récurrente des poches de sécheresse réduisant ainsi les rendements agricoles, qui à son tour aggrave l'insécurité alimentaire. En effet, mon pays, le Mali, est engagé dans un processus de transition dont la justification et le substrat reposent sur la nécessaire refondation de l'État, afin de répondre durablement aux aspirations profondes et légitimes de notre peuple, notamment en matière de restauration de la sécurité, de préservation de la paix, de cohésion nationale, de souveraineté, d'unité et d'indépendance véritable de notre État. Aujourd'hui, les interconnexions entre changement climatique, paix et sécurité sont désormais reconnues. La déclaration de Bamako, issue du premier forum régional sur la sécurité climatique au Sahel, qui s'est tenu en novembre 2023, reflète notre engagement à intégrer pleinement ces enjeux dans les politiques de sécurité et de développement. Mesdames et messieurs, en tout état de cause, bien qu'étant un pays à faible contribution aux émissions mondiales de gaz à effet de serre, le Mali est résolu à jouer pleinement son rôle dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques, en particulier à travers la mise en œuvre de sa contribution déterminée au niveau national. Ainsi, il est prévu dans le plan d'action de notre gouvernement un reboisement massif de 100 000 hectares par an, la restauration des terres dégradées, l'aménagement de 150 000 hectares de superficie forestière et de 100 000 hectares sous pratique de gestion durable du paysage, la réhabilitation des fleuves Niger et Sénégal, ainsi que la réalisation de 4 centrales photovoltaïques pour une capacité de 400 MW en 2024. Ces derniers investissements permettront d'augmenter de plus de 10% la part des énergies renouvelables de notre mix énergétique à l'horizon 2030. En outre, dans le cadre de la poursuite des œuvres sociales initiées par son Excellence le général d'armée Assimi Goïta, président de la transition chef de l'État, 402 forages ont été réalisés au bénéfice des populations vulnérables. Mesdames et messieurs, c'est le lieu également de rappeler que depuis le sommet de l'Alliance des États du Sahel, AES, tenu à Niamey le 6 juillet 2024, le Burkina, le Mali et le Niger ont décidé souverainement de transformer l'AES en Confédération des États du Sahel, dont la présidence pour la première année a été confiée au Mali. Leurs Excellences, le capitaine Ibrahim Traoré, président du Faso, chef de l'État du Burkina, le général d'armée Assimi Goïta, président de la transition, chef de l'État de la République du Mali, le général de brigade Abdourahmane Tiani, président du Conseil national pour la sauvegarde de la patrie, chef de l'État du Niger, père fondateur de cette confédération censée évoluer vers une fédération, ont centré leurs efforts sur 3 axes, à savoir la diplomatie, la défense et le développement, qui intègrent une part importante des questions climatiques et environnementales. À cet égard, dans le cadre de la présidence malienne de la Confédération AES, la feuille de route pour la première année prévoit notamment de faciliter l'accès à l'eau pour les populations de notre espace confédéral grâce au lancement d'une opération 1000 forages dans l'espace AES. Mesdames et messieurs, nous ne pouvons ignorer la responsabilité historique des plus grands pollueurs dans cette crise. Le continent africain, qui ne représente que 4% des émissions mondiales cumulées, subit malheureusement de manière disproportionnée les effets désastreux du réchauffement. Il est donc essentiel que ces pays honorent leurs engagements en matière de financement climatique, tout en veillant à ce que les promesses faites lors des précédentes COP soient tenues. L'urgence climatique nous impose de redoubler d'efforts à l'échelle mondiale. Par conséquent, le Mali appelle à une réforme à profondeur de l'architecture financière des banques multilatérales de développement et du système financier international, afin qu'ils puissent mieux répondre aux besoins des pays en développement, notamment pour l'adaptation et l'atténuation des effets du changement climatique. Mesdames et messieurs, le Mali formule le vœu que cette COP29 ne soit pas un simple exercice de diplomatie, mais un tournant décisif dans notre combat collectif pour la survie de notre planète et le bien-être des générations futures. Avant de conclure, permettez-moi de rendre un vibrant hommage au président Ilham Aliyev, ainsi qu'au peuple et au gouvernement azerbaïdjanais pour leur leadership et leur engagement dans la préparation de cette 29e COP. Nos remerciements vont également au groupe de négociateurs africains pour leur détermination à faire valoir les positions des pays en développement, particulièrement celles des pays africains. Merci de votre très aimable attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Toe Ole Sulu Kedrick Schuster, Minister of Natural Resources and Environment of Samoa, speaking on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
COP29 President, Your Excellency Mutka Papayev, my fellow dear ministers. At the outset, let me thank the government of Azerbaijan for the warm hospitality and wonderful arrangements. As the chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, Samoa speaks on behalf of 39 small islands and low-lying coastal nations, which represent many unheard voices beyond this room, who require climate justice and who need this process to move forward with action rather than talk. Climate change is a phenomenon that we are all feeling today with hotter summers and colder winters. We are now facing the possibility of losing the most vulnerable countries with the least capacity to address these climate events. Climate impacts must be addressed immediately and with a keen sense of urgency. IPCC scientists are calling for immediate reductions in greenhouse emissions to make the world safe. While we spend trillions globally on fossil fuel, infrastructure, and security, we are doing nothing to save humanity from the clutches of climate change. The preparation and implementation of the most ambitious NDCs is a critical part to the solutions under the Paris Agreement, and countries are at different stages. We must move forward from a business-as-usual scenario to scenarios that make our planet resilient. Deep emission cuts should be our key priority in developing our NDCs. The special needs and circumstances of SIDS were recognized in Rio in 1992 and reaffirmed at the last SIDS conference in Antigua and Barbuda in June this year. Our fragile economies, limited resources, and the remoteness of our islands, nations, must be fully addressed within the new goal. Agreement to a goal that fails to recognize the special case of small island states would ensure that the Paris Agreement will fail to meet its goals. Mr. President, this long-awaited climate finance COP must give us a beacon of hope in the coming decade. The goal must address the needs and priorities of each developing country. AOS's top priority for this COP is to see its key ask for the joint SIDS and LDC submission on respective minimum allocation floors of at least $39 billion per year for SIDS and $220 billion per year for LDCs, included in the final NCKG outcome. The goal should not focus entirely on mitigation and adaptation, but given the ever-increasing impacts on climate change, financing for loss and damage has to be included. The goal agreed in Baku must also provide a strong foundation on how we report back and monitor climate financing received. Transparency and accountability will allow us to reach the 1.5 degree goal in this critical decade. At COP26, we were promised a doubling of adaptation finance, and we were assured that our partners were working towards raising these funds. But over the last years, access to adaptation finance has been more than challenging for us. As countries with the least capacity to implement adaptation actions, we need grant-based financing to meet our adaptation needs. Mr. President, COP29 must deliver a substantive outcome on mitigation that allows us to progress the agreement we made last year as the part of the UAE consensus, which is critical for reaching the 1.5 degree goal and making our planet safe and prosperous. The newly established Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage that SIDS have long advocated for must come into play here. We must ensure the complementarity and coherence among all funding arrangements to address loss and damage as we strive to achieve the 1.5 goal within this crucial decade. Multilateralism is built on trust and cooperation between countries. Transparency is climate change reporting is a considerable game changer for maintaining this trust. Our commitments under Article 13 of the Paris Agreement provide the vehicle framework for this transparency, and we welcome the submission of parties' first biannual transparency reports at the end of this year. Mr. President, the ocean climate nexus is clear. Healthy oceans are fundamental to achieving our 1.5 goal. Samoa therefore calls for recognition of the ocean climate nexus in climate action, acknowledging that our ocean health is intrinsically linked to global climate stability. Samoa stands in solidarity with Australia in its bid to host COP31, or the Pacific COP, recognizing that its platform as essential for advocating global awareness and actions on climate issues that disproportionately affect island communities. I implore you all to lend your support to our bid for COP31 to amplify the voices of those that are most affected by climate change, particularly small island states, where the impacts are felt acutely. Mr. President, before I conclude, allow me to refresh our memories on the historic GST outcome last year. It was a difficult agreement to reach, but despite our differences, we outlined bold actions which call on the international community to transition away from fossil fuels by significantly increasing the use of renewable energy and improving energy efficiency. We must find space for operationalizing this monumental language as we embark on the journey of solving the climate problem together and making the world a better place for us all to live in. Finally, Mr. President, rest assured, small islands will work hard to be part of a solution that is based on equity and justice. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Wopke Hoekstra, European Commissioner of the European Union, and Mr. Atlia Steiner, State Secretary for Energy and Climate of the Ministry of Energy of Hungary, speaking on behalf of the European Union Group. Your Excellencies, you have the floor.
Dear Mr. President, dear Excellencies, I'm delivering this speech jointly with my colleague, Commissioner Hoekstra, on behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states. We want to reiterate the European Union's and its member states' commitment to climate action, to achieving climate neutrality by 2050, and to demonstrating our leadership continuously and transparently in the coming years. As there is no time to waste, it's important that we all come together in Baku to achieve a balanced outcome. As COP29 is said to be an implementation COP, we are concerned with the progress on mitigation. Therefore, it is a top priority for us to see advancement on mitigation in Baku and have an ambitious and robust outcome. Governments, the private sector and civil society around the world are aware that keeping the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal within reach, in line with the IPCC recommendations, is more than an environmental and scientific need. We already feel the consequences of inaction. Therefore, following the decision in Dubai, we must signal that we are all united in the fight against climate change by collectively responding towards the full implementation of the results of the global stocktake. It is our duty to ensure that the domestic and international implementation of the GST is ambitious, credible, and 1.5 aligned. To achieve an ambitious outcome on the NCQG by agreeing on an overall scale of the quantum, first we have to ensure that the group of contributors is broadened, including to those parties that are capable to do so. Let me also underline that there is a collective responsibility to contribute reflecting global solidarity, making sure that the finance flows to those who are most vulnerable, while driving the mobilization of finance at scale towards the Paris Agreement objectives. While we attach great importance to the public core of the new goal, public resources alone will not suffice. And furthermore, the international carbon markets could also help the developing countries to have access to more climate finance and cost-effective solutions. These effectively contribute to decarbonization, therefore we are committed to reach an agreement here in Baku. Last but not least, we consider it important to reach the balance between climate adaptation and mitigation at the COP29, because we believe that adaptation and mitigation go hand in hand in order to keep ourselves as international community to the goals of the Paris Agreement. And now let me hand over to Commissioner Högstra. Thank you very much.
For that, and thank you very much, President. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying that the EU's green transition is well on our way. We have adopted the full European Green Deal legislation to achieve our 2030 target and also stay the course for 2050 climate neutrality. We're scaling up our investments in energy efficiency and clean energy, and of course that includes renewables, hydrogen and grids. And let me state once again that we as a global community cannot afford to backslide. We all must build on what we call the UAE consensus. There is simply no success without it. And that is the reason that the EU has spearheaded the COP28 Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge, and we're currently implementing it. On the eve of the G20 summit, European Commission President von der Leyen and South African President Ramaphosa launched the global campaign Scaling Up Renewables in Africa to mobilize renewables investment in Africa. And to make sure we maintain momentum more broadly, the EU will invite G20 leaders and others to join forces in a new global energy transition forum. It will bring together governments, international organizations and financial actors to double down on implementation. Ahead of COP30, we must all prepare new NDCs, and these must be economy-wide. They must cover all greenhouse gases, and they need to be aligned with our 1.5 temperature goal. And just to be clear, the bar needs to go up for all of us. Colleagues, we're here to deliver an ambitious new collective quantified goal on climate finance. A goal that contributes to making all financial flows consistent with the Paris Agreement goals. It should account for the evolving economic capacities of partners to provide and mobilize climate finance. And we're also making progress on the rules on carbon markets. It is essential that we all sign up to high integrity, to additionality, to durability, and to accountability. President, ladies and gentlemen, let me close off by saying that the European Union remains deeply committed to climate action and that we will continue to demonstrate leadership in the years ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. David Forner Massoni, Secretary of State for Energy Transition, Transport and Mobility of Andorra. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguido presidente, distinguidas autoridades, delegados y también señoras y señores, es para mí un honor dirigirme hoy aquí con ustedes en la COP29 en nombre de Andorra, un país pequeño a nivel de extensión, pero grande en cuanto a acción climática. Desde el 2011, como parte de la Convención, Andorra ha buscado liderar como ejemplo y es un orgullo que podemos decir que Andorra ha sido el primer país en presentar y completar el informe bianual de transparencia reforzado, en el marco de la transparencia reforzada del Acuerdo de París. Este paso subraya no solo nuestra dedicación, sino también nuestro compromiso con la transparencia y la responsabilidad en nuestras acciones climáticas. Quisiera aprovechar esta ocasión para agradecer a la Presidencia y a la diplomacia francesa que durante la COP21 idearon este nuevo paradigma que no podemos desperdiciar ahora. Por eso hemos participado y dado apoyo a la Declaración sobre Transparencia Climática Global, presentado el pasado lunes para animar a todos los países a cumplir su parte. En esta misma línea, desde Andorra, presentamos nuestra contribución determinada a nivel nacional 3.0 en tiempo y forma, tal y como establece el Acuerdo de París. En esta actualización incrementaremos la ambición de nuestros objetivos de reducción de emisiones para 2035 respecto a los niveles de emisión de 2005, en línea con limitar el aumento de temperatura global a 1,5 grados en relación de la era preindustrial. Andorra está alineada no solo con las metas del Acuerdo de París, sino también con los compromisos derivados del primer Global Stocktake presentado el año pasado en Dubái. Entendemos que la consecución de los objetivos globales de la Agenda 2030 como objetivos del desarrollo sostenible tienen que fundamentarse en el multilateralismo que ofrece esta COP. Todo esto sin dejar de lado la adaptación, que sigue siendo una prioridad clave, especialmente para un país de montaña como el nuestro. La vulnerabilidad de estos territorios, en realidad ampliamente identificada por la comunidad científica, junto con el reconocimiento de que los límites de adaptación en las zonas montañosas son cada vez más evidentes y cercanos. Tal y como se ha identificado en el marco de cooperación transfronteriza, a través del Observatorio Pirenaico del Cambio Climático, el aumento de temperatura media en el Pirineo es superior al de su entorno más próximo, llegado a un incremento de 2 grados desde 1959. El pasado invierno, nuestro país fue el más cálido registrado. Para un país de montaña que tiene como uno de sus pilares económicos el turismo de nieve, estos datos son realmente alarmantes. Por ello, Andorra está concentrando esfuerzos en la adaptación de los sectores más expuestos a estas condiciones. Sectores como el turismo, la agricultura, el comercio, la salud y la energía requieren protección y adaptación constante para seguir prosperando bajo estas nuevas condiciones climáticas. Especialmente para los territorios como el nuestro, con pequeña incidencia en las emisiones globales de nuestro planeta, pero altamente vulnerables, como acabamos de comentar, a los efectos del cambio climático, ser transparentes en las comunicaciones y cumplir con las obligaciones de comunicación bajo la Convención es esencial para luego ser exigentes con el resto de partes que tienen grandes potenciales de emisiones globales. Provistos con datos e información transparentes, estos territorios estamos mejor posicionados para abogar por el apoyo y los recursos equitativos. Solo siendo ejemplares y transparentes podremos ser exigentes. Creemos entonces firmemente que cada país, independientemente de su tamaño e impacto global, tiene un papel crucial para desempeñar en mantener el objetivo de 1,5 grados al alcance. Luchemos para la transparencia. Fight together for transparency. Muchas gracias, Presidencia, Secretariado. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Josephine Napon Cosmos Ngoya, Minister of Environment and Forestry of South Sudan. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Of COP29, Excellencies, on outset, I would like to take this opportunity to convey to you the greetings and well wishes of His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit, President of the Republic of South Sudan, who is unable to attend this COP29 because of pressing issues back at home. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the people and the government of Azerbaijan for the excellent hospitality accorded to my delegation and for hosting this conference in the beautiful city of Baku. Mr. President, I would like to congratulate you on the election as COP29 President and wish you success in leading this COP to fruitful outcomes. Since 2019 to date, South Sudan is reeling from severe flooding that have impacted over 3 million people, resulting to internal displacement and loss of livelihoods. Droughts, excess heat waves, absurd rain patterns, all resulted in crop failure. Thus, over 60% of our population are now categorized as food insecure. As a country most affected by the impacts of climate change, building the resilience of people to adapt to the impacts of climate change is the priority of the people and the government of the Republic of South Sudan. However, this priority cannot be achieved without the provision of adequate climate finance. Therefore, the new collective quantified goal is to be agreed at COP29, and the new quantum is to be in trillions of dollars, and modalities for accessing the new funds are to be streamlined and simplified. On the loss and damage, the sustainable capitalization and operationalization of the fund is to be expedited, such that our affected populations can be compensated. On the emission gap, it is abundantly clear we are falling behind on cutting GHG emissions, and the current path will lead us to a 3.5 degrees Celsius increase. Therefore, to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we urge the developed countries and the big emitters to increase their ambitions and drastically cut their emissions such that the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal is kept alive. On Article 6, South Sudan is home to the largest wetland in Africa. The Sudan has over 30% of forest cover with enormous carbon sequestration capacity. Therefore, Article 6 negotiations that are dragged on are to be concluded amicably at this COP. This will enable us to trade in carbon and invest the proceeds in our climate mitigation and adaptation projects. Mr. President, many vulnerable people are eagerly watching and expecting COP29 to deliver outcomes that will improve their lives and livelihoods. Therefore, South Sudan will be negotiating in a good faith and will be ready to reach common ground and consensus on difficult issues such that together we can turn the tide to deadly impacts of climate change. Lastly, our environment requires us to change our attitudes and embark on ambitious nature-based solutions by actively protecting, sustainably managing, and restoring degraded ecosystems that are source of our food, water, energy, wealth, and livelihood. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Diego Pacheco Balanza, General Director on Living Well and Foreign Policy of the Plurinational State of Bolivia, speaking on behalf of the like-minded group. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Excellency. Bolivia speaks on behalf of the like-minded developing countries, LMDC. This is indeed a critical decade, and the reason the decade has become critical is largely because of the inadequate action and unfulfilled promises by developed countries. Our countries are suffering the impacts of climate change due largely to the historical emissions of developed countries. For us, as developing countries, our people's lives, their very survival, and their livelihoods are at stake. Our people are suffering the consequences has not been caused. Mitigation action by developed countries has not been forthcoming, even though the Convention and its Paris Agreement make it clear that the developed countries must take the lead on mitigation. Developed countries have failed to achieve their emission reductions, and instead of reducing their emissions, are increasing them by 2030. Developed countries have not only failed in raising ambition, they have also squarely failed in providing the committed support to developing countries, which is their legal obligation. The report not provide a clear picture of whether we have received the 100 billion goal per year. According to the OECD report, developed countries' public climate finance provided bilaterally and through multilateral channels mainly took the form of loans and to a lesser extent, grants. This is a very disturbing trend. A significant share of loans has adverse implications for the macroeconomic stability of developing countries. How can we be celebratory about claims that the 100 billion goal has been delivered? The idea of any goal is to be able to reach it. And to reach it, we need to be able to track it. Unfortunately, this is one of the biggest lessons of the 100 billion goal. Tracking its achievement is fraught with contests. It is a high time we appreciate that the several challenges climate finance face stream from the lack of a common definition of climate finance and accounting methodology, which render tracking climate finance flows nearly impossible. We hear all the time that the private sector will resolve all climate challenges in developing countries, and we need to use innovative instruments. The latest adaptation gap report states that only around 1/3 of the adaptation finance is in areas financed by the private sector. The 100 billion progress report by the SCF states, while progress has been made in mobilizing climate finance for developing countries, challenges remain, particularly in relation to scaling up climate finance from MDBs and mobilizing private finance. And yet, developed countries constantly attempt to transfer ownership to the private sector. Developed countries must acknowledge that they have failed to meet the annual mobilization goal of 100 billion for the period since 2013 and provide the arrears they owe to developing countries. That's why a successful negotiation of the NCQG in this COP is critical for the implementation of the Convention at this Paris Agreement, taking into account that developed countries have the legal obligation to provide financial resources and means of implementation to developing countries. Finance is not charity. Finance is a legal obligation of developed countries under the Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Trevor Manemahanga, Minister of Environment, Climate Change, Disaster Management, and Meteorology of Solomon Islands. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, esteemed delegates, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the government and people of Solomon Islands. At the outset, I congratulate you on your election to the COP presidency and thank the government and people of Azerbaijan for hosting us in this beautiful country. The agency to address climate change demands decisive leadership, and we are confident that you will provide it. The Solomon Islands, like many least developed countries, as well as small island developing states, are on the front lines of the climate crisis. Climate change is a reality, and our stories now are those of loss, displacement, suffering, and erosion of culture and heritage. We welcome the focus of COP29 on climate finance, but we must not lose sight of the need to keep global warming to 1.5 because our survival and the health of our planet to be able to sustain life depends on limiting global temperature rise. Madam President, Solomon Islands is concerned that the latest synthesis report of the nationally determined contributions and outcomes of the first global stocktake point to an overshoot of global temperatures beyond 1.5-degree warming. High-emitting countries must take our plight seriously and increase mitigation ambition and action. It is imperative that major emitters address the root cause of this crisis, which is the emission of greenhouse gases. Solomon Islands is gravely concerned at the lack of outcome from the subsidiary body sessions. We urge all parties to ensure that COP29 delivers a decision of substance under the mitigation work program. The global stocktake presents a vital opportunity for transparent evaluation of the progress made toward our climate goals. There must be a follow-up on implementation of mitigation outcomes from the global stocktake, including the phasing out of fossil fuels removal of fossil fuel subsidies, tripling of renewables, and doubling of energy efficiency. Madam President, climate finance is a critical enabler of effective climate action. However, we operate in an unjust international financial architecture. We cannot effectively address vulnerabilities and enhance resilience when the international financial architecture and the great reliance on debt instruments contributes to exacerbating our existing financial burdens and strained economies. Funding must be significantly grant-based, predictable, and unburdened by complex and onerous processes. The current system of climate finance is demonstrably failing, considering the promised $100 billion has fallen woefully short, marred by a lack of transparency and accountability. The lessons learned from the failures of the current climate finance system must shape the new collective quantified goal. Madam President, NCQG must deliver pathways and timeframes to keep the 1.5-degree goal alive, guided by the most recent science. It must provide accessible, simplified, predictable, additional, and crucially, grant-based finance to meet the needs of the developing nations. The NCQG must operationalize the Article 9.4 of the Paris Agreement. It must also establish a minimum floor of allocation for seeds and LDCs. Madam President, Solomon Islands acknowledge the swift establishment of the fund for responding to loss and damage. We urge for its swift operationalization to address the pressing needs of vulnerable communities. Madam President, Solomon Islands is deeply concerned by the devastating impacts of climate change on our marine ecosystems, fisheries, and overall livelihoods. We urge the UNFCCC bodies to give this issue the serious attention it deserves. We believe the success of this COP hinges on transparency, accountability, and equitable partnerships. Together, we can overcome the challenge before us and create a more resilient future for all. In closing, I want to express our sincere appreciation for the excellent leadership and efforts of the COP29. We must use this momentum to ensure our collective commitment to a sustainable future for all. The 1.5-degree goal is not negotiable, for it is a matter of survival. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Asterio Api, Minister of Climate Change and National Resilience of Nauru. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, honorable colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I would like to thank the government of Azerbaijan for the excellent COP29 arrangements and the people of Baku for welcoming us to their beautiful city. Madam President, as it has become all too familiar at these meetings, we arrive at COP29 on a wave of dire projections regarding the state of the climate. Greenhouse gas emissions, temperatures, sea levels continue their unabated climb. Record cyclones, rainfall events, and heat waves hammer countries across the world. The only thing that does not seem to be on an upward trajectory is climate finance, which continues to lag far behind developing country needs. That does not mean the Pacific Island countries like Nauru are failing to act. I would like to commend the climate leadership coming from the small island developing states, despite the widening finance gap. Nauru too is pursuing ambitious plans that will build our resilience to climate change impacts and drive down our emissions. Next year, Nauru will submit the next update to our NDCs, which will go beyond the previous iterations on the scale of emission. We expect to raise our existing renewable energy targets of 50% for electricity generation, which we expect to achieve well ahead of schedule. We also intend to pursue aggressive policies to increase energy efficiency across the economy and shift our transport system decisively towards electric vehicles. I would like to emphasize that the responsible development of deep-sea minerals could provide the required metals for the just transition towards much cleaner renewable energy technologies. The centerpiece of our updated NDC will be the Higher Ground Initiative. a multi-generational urban plan development that will transform our single island of 12,000 people. As with many small islands, our housing and essential infrastructures are concentrated on low-lying coastal areas. Due to projected sea level rise, much of this must be relocated. After nearly a 3-year planning and design process, we have completed a new master land use plan, as well as a detailed site plan for Nauru's first smart village, leveraging climate-smart urbanism. The Higher Ground initiative will deliver enormous benefits essential to the task of responding to climate impacts. We are ready to begin the constructions of the 10-hectare smart village once financing is secured. In this regard, we have submitted a concept note on the Higher Ground initiative to the Green Climate Fund, and we humbly request their support. Madam President, climate funding remains critical for climate action, particularly for the developed countries. Green Climate Fund, multilateral development banks. COP29 must catalyze scaled-up climate finance commensurate with the needs of developing countries. Adaptation finance must be grant-based or highly concessionary, not to increase unsustainable debt burden faced by so many countries. The new global goal on finance should reflect this reality and be rooted in developing countries' needs rather than political expediency. Madam President, the climate crisis is relentless and it will not wait. How many more COP meetings must I attend to grasp the depth of the challenges facing my island nation? The truth is, we cannot afford to delay. Action cannot wait for the next COP. It must begin now. We urge the global community to match our courage with unwavering commitment and provide the essential support our nations require. We all know too well one of our most popular phrase, the 1.5 to stay alive. Madam President, we intend to do more than just stay alive. We also intend to prosper and thrive. So I say, 1.5 to stay alive, climate finance for us to thrive. I thank you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Subhalet Ang, Minister of Environment of Cambodia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to start by thanking the government of Azerbaijan and the UNCCC Secretariat for hosting the 29th UN Climate Change Conference here in this beautiful city of Baku. On behalf of the Royal Government of Cambodia, I hereby reaffirm our strong commitment to both national and international efforts to meet the target set forth in the Paris Agreement on climate change. Although Cambodia is a low greenhouse gas emitter country, it faces daunting risks from climate-induced impacts such as flooding, heat wave, and land degradations, and heightened vulnerability to the adverse impact on climate change. In response to the global climate crisis, Cambodia has set high ambitious pledges in the 2020 updated NDC and is committed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. In support of a holistic approach for the Paris Agreement implementation, the Circular Strategy for Environment 23-28 has streamlined the climate agenda into Cambodia's Sustainable Development Goal and other national development priorities. At this point, I'm very pleased to share with the conference that we are running an anti-plastic campaign with more than 9.7 million people from all walks of life. More than half of the Cambodian population participated in committing not to use plastic bags and to clean up plastic waste from public areas. In parallel, we also run a campaign to green Cambodia by starting to plant over 1 million trees on the first year and increase annually to expand forest cover toward carbon neutral by 2050. Cambodia has also adopted a new Article 6 operation manual and is actively working to expand carbon market opportunities in 6 sectors. They are energy, industry, solvent, agriculture, forestry, and waste. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there is an urgent need to bold action for all, but must ensure climate finance to implement NDC and long-term strategies for parties under LDC and SIDS categories. We called upon the developed country parties and the highest emitters to enhance their financial commitments while establishing ambitious targets that exceed US $100 billion per year. Furthermore, a simplified modality for direct access to the Green Climate Fund should be operationalized. The world is looking forward to hear concrete results at this COP29 that will deliver to parties to ensure sustainable economic development and social safeguard for communities suffering from and relentlessly fighting against the climate crisis. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Franz Tattenbach Capra, Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Señores y señoras, Costa Rica es un país pequeño, centroamericano, pero con credenciales de líder ambiental, que ve el trabajo por la sostenibilidad ambiental, la descarbonización y la adaptación al cambio climático como pivotes de la competitividad y productividad como medios para lograr un país y una sociedad más justa y equitativa. Creemos en el llamado para la acción climática incrementada hecho por el presidente de la COP29 debe convertirse en una parte del ADN de los procesos bajo la Convención y el Acuerdo de París. Somos una nación con mínima deuda histórica de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, pero ya pagando un alto precio por los impactos adversos de la variabilidad climática y el calentamiento global. Sin embargo, con un compromiso claro para seguir avanzando hacia la meta del Acuerdo de París y reducir drásticamente la brecha que nos indica la ciencia. Hemos realizado importantes avances en el conocimiento del riesgo climático y la problemática ambiental y sus impactos territoriales, así como en cuanto a la identificación de las acciones que debemos asumir y estamos trabajando en su implementación. Somos un país ambicioso y esperamos ser más ambicioso si tenemos señales claras y más señales de implementación disponibles para tal efecto, más recursos. La justicia climática debe ser un elemento más del compromiso global. Si no se generan los incentivos apropiados, nuestra ambición se verá limitada, en especial porque países como el nuestro seguimos subsidiando las crecientes pérdidas y daños, producto de las emisiones históricas y que se exacerban cada día con la brecha de los esfuerzos globales para reducir las emisiones. Los costos asociados con el cambio climático podrían ya superar el 3% del Producto Interno Bruto en nuestro país. Por ello, es importante resaltar nuestros logros en procura de fortalecer las metas del 1.5 grados centígrados. Tenemos y hemos desvinculado la energía eléctrica del uso de combustibles fósiles y vemos este sector y nuestro potencial como una manera de descarbonizar a industria internacional electrointensiva también. Estamos convencidos que la descarbonización en nuestra energía puede ser y acelerar la descarbonización de otros. Señoras y señores, tenemos la responsabilidad colectiva de avanzar sin mayor dilación hacia un marco de acción que reconcilie la aspiración de todos y prosperar y las limitaciones naturales de nuestro planeta, respetando los derechos humanos inalienables de todos los habitantes, incluyendo la equidad de género, como definido en la Agenda 2030 y los ODS. No lograremos abordar el titánico desafío para lograr el desarrollo sostenible y la erradicación de la pobreza sin ganar la lucha contra el clima. Costa Rica, a pesar de sus limitaciones, seguirá siendo un líder global de sostenibilidad y resiliencia climática, lo que refuerza nuestro compromiso de actuar de manera ambiciosa frente a la crisis climática y colaborar estrechamente con los demás países, así como entidades internacionales para fortalecer los mecanismos de financiamiento climático. Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency, Ms. Leonore Gewessler, Federal Minister for Climate Action, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation, and Technology of Austria. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, 1 year ago in Dubai, I addressed you by saying we've just lived through the hottest year ever recorded on planet Earth. 12 months later, we know this is no longer true. 2024 will be even hotter. There is almost no place on this planet that is not affected by the devastating effects of the climate crisis. From the most vulnerable island states, whose voices we just heard, to my home country, Austria, in the middle of Europe, lives are lost, homes are destroyed, futures are at stake. We meet here in Baku at a time of utmost urgency. Urgency for everyone, by the way. This is why it's all the more regrettable that this process is not as inclusive as it should be. In Dubai, we agreed on ambitious action, tripling renewables and transitioning away from fossil fuels. This year, we have to follow through. Great commitments are only historic if they are delivered on. So we must encourage all parties to put forward new and ambitious NDCs next year, informed by the results of the first global stocktake and in line with our collective 1.5-degree goal. We need strong action on adaptation in pursuit of the global goal on adaptation that we agreed on last year, and COP29 must deliver and accelerate on the UAE framework for climate resilience. To achieve all of this, yes, we need the necessary means. A new collective quantified goal of climate finance, therefore, is a central part of the package of issues to be finalized here in Baku. A climate finance goal that makes sure to support developing countries in the transformation and in dealing with extreme conditions, while reflecting the reality that the world has changed since we first started to negotiate decades ago. Our discussions here need to be a starting point for a much larger transformation that surpasses what we traditionally think of when we consider international climate finance. We all know that financing a global transition towards a climate-neutral society will need more than just public money. It has to be a common effort. Ladies and gentlemen, planet Earth will endure, but it's mankind's future that's at risk. Our fight for climate action is a fight for people. It's a fight for us. It's a fight for our dreams. It's a fight for our hopes. And in the end, it's a fight for our lives. This is what COP29 is all about, and this is what we all need to deliver on. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Roger Barrow, Minister of Environment, Water and Sanitation of Burkina Faso. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madame la Présidente, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation, distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, le Burkina Faso se réjouit de prendre part à la 29e conférence des parties sur les changements climatiques à Baku. Permettez-moi de vous adresser les chaleureuses salutations de son Excellence, le capitaine Ibrahim Traoré, président du Faso, au peuple frère et ami de la République d'Azerbaïdjan, et de remercier pour l'accueil chaleureux, l'hospitalité réservée à ma délégation, ainsi que la bonne organisation de cette conférence. Au président de la COP29, toutes mes félicitations et mes vœux de succès. Distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, la 29e conférence, qui est celle de la mobilisation des financements, se tient dans un contexte international où les défis sont multiples. Elle devrait permettre d'orienter les négociations vers le renforcement des engagements concrets pour protéger l'environnement mondial et développer des économies résilientes. Cela passe par la prise de décisions de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, le rehaussement du niveau des financements climatiques sensibles à l'adaptation et un engagement solidaire à développer de vastes programmes de résilience sobre en carbone et à fort impact pour les communautés locales et vulnérables. Distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, mon pays, en dépit de l'adversité du climat et du défi sécuritaire, est résilient et ambitionne réduire ses émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 29,42% à l'horizon 2030, conformément à sa contribution déterminée au niveau national et dont le coût global de mise en œuvre est évalué à 4,125 261 000 $ US. Par ailleurs, la mise en œuvre de son plan national d'adaptation révisé 2024-2028, qui se chiffre à 5 millions de $, permettra de renforcer la résilience des populations et des écosystèmes. Sous le leadership de leurs excellences, le président du Faso et le Premier ministre, le Burkina Faso a renforcé la gouvernance des changements climatiques au plus haut niveau, à travers l'adoption d'un décret portant cadre de transparence climatique au Burkina Faso, avec la mise en place d'un système national de mesures, rapportage et vérification, la création par décret du Comité national sur les changements climatiques, l'adoption de la vision 2050 de développement long terme à faible émission de carbone ou stratégie bas carbone. Distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, plaidant toujours pour la prise en compte des circonstances spécifiques de l'Afrique, le Burkina Faso est partie prenante à la déclaration de Bamako sur la sécurité climatique dans le Sahel et à la déclaration ministérielle de Kampala sur les migrations, l'environnement et le changement climatique. Le nexus climat, paix et sécurité et le nexus migration, environnement et changement climatique doivent être financés au nom de la justice climatique et de l'intérêt mondial afin de juguler le phénomène du terrorisme et renforcer la résilience des populations déplacées. C'est pourquoi l'objectif stratégique 4.5 du plan d'action national pour la stabilisation et le développement du Burkina Faso vise à inverser les tendances de dégradation de l'environnement et des ressources naturelles pour favoriser la résilience climatique et la réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, le Burkina Faso invite la communauté internationale à s'assumer pour répondre aux défis des changements climatiques en traduisant les décisions des conférences des parties en actions concrètes et mesurables à travers notamment le financement, le transfert des technologies et le renforcement des capacités des acteurs. Mon pays est solidaire de la position africaine, du groupe des pays les moins avancés et du G77 plus la Chine sur les négociations climatiques. Le Burkina Faso, tout en félicitant la présidente de la COP29 pour l'appel de Baku sur l'action climatique pour la paix et le relèvement, qui est en parfaite adéquation avec la déclaration de Bamako et la réalité de la Confédération des États de l'Alliance du Sahel, est partie prenante des initiatives lancées ici à Baku, notamment sur le financement, l'investissement, le commerce et la réduction du méthane provenant des déchets organiques. Particulièrement pour le fonds sur les pertes et dommages, mon pays plaide pour des subventions et la mise en place de mécanismes à accès direct vu l'urgence climatique pour une question d'équité, d'efficacité et de justice. Les inondations et autres catastrophes naturelles en 2024 et leurs conséquences interpellent à plus de célérité dans l'opérationnalisation de ces fonds. Monsieur le Président, distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais terminer en formulant le vœu qu'avec l'ambition et la volonté qui nous animent, la conférence de Baku permet d'ouvrir de meilleures perspectives et jeter les bases d'une consolidation des acquis en matière de résilience et de développement durable. Avec vous, je note que nous sommes esclaves des conséquences du changement climatique et devons travailler à nous en défaire. En absence de solutions communes et durables, nous y resterons esclaves. Et pour paraphraser le capitaine Thomas Sankara qui disait « L'esclave qui n'est pas capable d'assumer sa révolte ne mérite pas que l'on s'apitoie sur son sort. » Le Burkina Faso, à l'image d'autres pays, ne souhaite pas être esclave des méfaits, des règlements climatiques et est résolument engagé pour s'y affranchir et garantir un avenir prospère, paisible et durable. La patrie ou la mort, nous vaincrons. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency, Ms. Jami Diallo, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Guinea. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madame la Présidente de la COP29, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, chefs de délégation, Mesdames et Messieurs, par ma voix, la République de Guinée exprime sa profonde gratitude au gouvernement de la République d'Azerbaïdjan pour son accueil chaleureux et l'organisation remarquable de cette 29e conférence des parties. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, malgré sa contribution marginale aux émissions mondiales de gaz à effet de serre, la Guinée n'a pas échappé en 2024 aux effets nocifs du changement climatique. Les inondations et les sécheresses qui ont impacté mon pays cette année rappellent l'urgence d'actions ambitieuses, coordonnées et inclusives pour contenir l'élévation des températures et renforcer notre résilience. Face à cette urgence climatique, la Guinée ambitionne d'atteindre plusieurs objectifs stratégiques d'ici 2030, parmi lesquels atteindre 80% de production d'électricité d'origine hydraulique et solaire, réduire de 50% la consommation moyenne de bois de feu par habitant, freiner la déforestation et la dégradation des sols et atteindre 30% d'aires protégées, terrestres et marines sur l'ensemble du territoire national, créer un marché local de crédit carbone volontaire lié au secteur minier, favorisant ainsi la mobilisation de financement du secteur privé pour la lutte contre les changements climatiques, préserver les ressources en eau et promouvoir une économie bleue. Et tout récemment, la Guinée a pris aussi 2 initiatives majeures qui vont grandement faciliter l'atteinte de nos objectifs climatiques et contribuer à renforcer le combat mondial pour un climat plus viable. D'abord, grâce au leadership de son Excellence le général Mamadi Doumbouya, président de la République de Guinée, notre pays s'apprête à jouer un rôle majeur dans la décarbonisation de l'industrie mondiale du fer à travers la réalisation du méga-projet mine-infrastructure de Simandou après plusieurs décennies d'attente. En effet, par sa teneur exceptionnelle, le minerai de fer de Simandou nécessitera moins d'énergie pour sa transformation et contribuera ainsi à significativement réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre dans le secteur minier. Ensuite, mon pays a décidé de prendre le leadership d'une coalition internationale pour la restauration du massif du Fouta-Djallon, véritable château d'eau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. En effet, le massif du Fouta-Djallon concentre les têtes de source des principaux cours d'eau de la sous-région ouest africaine. Et de ce fait, il est urgent d'apporter une réponse forte aux graves menaces qui pèsent sur cet écosystème pour accroître la résilience des communautés et préserver la biodiversité. Nous avons ainsi engagé un processus d'inscription du site sur la liste du patrimoine mondial de l'UNESCO. Ces 2 initiatives majeures témoignent de l'engagement sans faille de la Guinée à contribuer aux efforts mondiaux d'atténuation et d'adaptation aux effets du changement climatique. Toutefois, ces initiatives ne peuvent suffire sans un soutien substantiel de la communauté internationale. Et c'est pourquoi nous appelons ici et encore à un renforcement des financements climatiques et à une meilleure accessibilité des ressources pour nos projets d'atténuation. En tant que nation engagée pour le développement durable, la Guinée réaffirme sa volonté de contribuer activement aux efforts globaux pour limiter le réchauffement climatique à une augmentation de 1,5 degré Celsius. Nous renouvelons notre appel à l'action et à la solidarité internationale pour bâtir un monde résilient et durable où chaque nation, chaque communauté et chaque écosystème peut prospérer. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Nik Nazmi bin Nik Ahmad, Minister of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability of Malaysia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Honorable distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues, I would like to extend Malaysia's heartfelt gratitude to the government of Azerbaijan for your warm hospitality in hosting COP29. Your efforts in bringing us together for this critical dialogue on climate action are deeply appreciated. A lot can change and happen in a year. The last time we convened, monumental decisions were made, mainly from the global stocktake exercise concluded in COP28. Back home, we followed up on these efforts. We launched our National Climate Change Policy 2.0 this year to integrate recent global developments and other national policies. This document outlines our pathways to achieving our nationally determined contribution target of a 45% reduction in economy-wide GHG emission intensity by 2030 relative to 2005 levels, and bringing forward our commitment to reaching net zero by 2050. We are also committed to delivering our first biennial transparency report by 31st December 2024 to fulfill our obligations under the enhanced transparency framework. To ensure we can effectively deliver these initiatives, we are enacting a climate change bill which will enhance our climate change governance and facilitate the fulfillment of other obligations under the Paris Agreement. We are also finalizing our national arrangement to operationalize Article 6 of the Paris Agreement for the private sector. To reduce emissions more effectively, Malaysia is committed to implement a carbon tax in 2026, as announced by our Prime Minister in the 2025 budget. We have also transitioned from blanket to targeted subsidies with regards to electricity and fuel so that the rich are no longer subsidized with regards to their carbon emissions. Malaysia likewise acknowledges our role as a custodian to the natural resources bestowed on our country. As one of the world's most mega-diverse countries, we have 20% of all animal species, forests of over 100 million years old, and part of the Coral Triangle. We are committed to sustainably managing our biodiversity, and this is an asset in our fight against climate change. We are also proud recipients of the Global Climate Fund to assist in our National Adaptation Plan. As you can see, our recent efforts have shown that we are fulfilling our responsibilities, although we contribute less than 1% of global emissions. Thus, we remain steadfast in upholding the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities as enshrined in the UNFCCC, especially at this critical juncture. The world is now at a crossroads in the context of financing. Although mandates and resources are available, there continues to be divergences in the common understanding of pooling and mobilizing climate finance. It is galling to see how developed countries spend trillions of dollars to fuel war and conflict, while the Global South is denied more funding for climate action. Thus, we call on developed nations to fulfill their responsibility to provide climate finance and ensure that this funding is accessible and impactful. We also call on those who are more than capable of leading to set more ambitious goals that can significantly elevate our efforts against climate change. If more funding from developed nations are forthcoming, Malaysia will be able to do much more. Currently, we are in the midst of formulating our third generation NDC, which we commit to submit next year. We expect this to be more ambitious, and appropriate means of implementations are crucial to ensure that this goal can be realized. Thus, we believe that these resources, along with participation from the third sector, can propel actions to realize the visions that we have set when Paris Agreement entered force in 2016. In this regard, we must come to the necessary understandings to avoid a path of inaction. However, we recognize that countries cannot fight climate change in isolation. Embracing multilateralism is paramount in this cause. As we gather here, it is imperative that we recognize that progress in our negotiations must advance more rapidly as time is of the essence. As we look ahead to the conclusion of COP29, we expect it to set a clear and ambitious pathway that will influence negotiations in COP30 and beyond. Our decisions will shape the climate landscape for years to come and we must seize this opportunity to strengthen our collective resolve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Mrs. Céline Carreon-Dajoni, Minister of Public Works, Environment and Urban Development of Monaco. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, tout d'abord, je souhaite exprimer ma profonde gratitude au gouvernement d'Azerbaïdjan et au secrétariat de la Convention pour l'organisation de cette 29e conférence des parties. C'est un honneur pour moi de prendre la parole au nom de Monaco, un État dont l'engagement climatique est profondément ancré dans notre histoire collective. Le changement climatique est une menace réelle et immédiate. Nous assistons à une multiplication d'événements climatiques extrêmes, des records de température mondiale, la fonte des glaciers, l'élévation du niveau des mers et un effondrement de la biodiversité terrestre et marine. Ces phénomènes combinés compromettent la sécurité alimentaire, la santé publique, ainsi que la paix et la stabilité internationale. Face à ce constat alarmant, Monaco, sous l'impulsion de son Altesse Sérénissime le Prince Albert II, plaide cette cause depuis de très nombreuses années et s'efforce de montrer l'exemple sur son territoire national. Ainsi, nous avons pris des engagements ambitieux dans le cadre de l'accord de Paris, avec pour objectif une réduction de 55% de nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre d'ici 2030 et la neutralité carbone à l'horizon 2050. Pour relever ces défis, le gouvernement princier porte de fortes politiques publiques pour encourager l'utilisation des énergies renouvelables sur notre territoire, des énergies renouvelables et innovantes, en finançant des infrastructures nécessaires tant pour l'efficacité énergétique de nos bâtiments que pour l'électrification de nos transports. Chers collègues, le premier bilan mondial réalisé l'année dernière est malheureusement sans appel. Nos actions sont encore insuffisantes et nous tendons dangereusement au-delà du point de bascule des plus 1,5 degrés. La lutte contre le changement climatique est notre responsabilité collective. Il est essentiel que dans les semaines à venir, et fort de nos engagements et de nos échanges pendant cette COP, nous puissions, tous pays confondus, soumettre des contributions déterminées au niveau national qui soient alignées sur nos objectifs de long terme. De plus, la conclusion d'un accord ambitieux sur le financement climatique est primordiale pour la mise en œuvre concrète et efficace de l'accord de Paris. Mesdames et messieurs, l'ampleur de la tâche ne doit pas nous décourager, mais nous inciter à rester unis, à agir avec force et détermination pour protéger les populations où qu'elles soient, en limitant leur vulnérabilité face à des phénomènes climatiques toujours plus extrêmes. Cette COP29 doit nous rappeler que l'échec n'est pas une option. Nous devons rehausser nos ambitions collectives, accélérer la mise en œuvre de nos politiques publiques, veiller à ce que tout secteur de la société soutienne cette stratégie mondiale. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Panyomwenyo Pohamba Shifeta, Minister of Environment, Forestry and Tourism of Namibia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellency, COP29 President, Your Excellencies, the Republic of Namibia would like to extend its warm appreciation to the government and people of Azerbaijan for the warm hospitality we have received since our arrival in this beautiful city, Baku. Equally, Namibia would like to thank the government of Azerbaijan and the UNFCCC Secretariat for excellent arrangements made to host this very spectacular event. Mr. President, COP29 is taking place when the world is devastated by climate-induced disasters of all kinds. In Namibia, we feel the severity of these negative events already by far. The government of the Republic of Namibia declared a national state of emergency on drought this year, 2024, due to the poor rainfall never experienced in more than 60 years back. If Namibia is in such a state of emergency, what about other parts of the world, the island states, whose future's existence are not certain if we continue with this business as usual? What about those who find themselves in a conflict, the marginalized, the poor, living on handouts? Mr. President, we came here to Baku with a renewed hope that COP29 will deliver on climate finance. We respectfully believe that those whose historically missions have caused global warming will take responsibility for their actions and compensate the developing world on a polluter-pay basis. However, what we are witnessing from the outcome of the past week of negotiations is contrary to our expectations. Mr. President, there is no need to beg for those who cause damage to pay, but we are simply asking the developed world to honor its commitments under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. These are the only international instruments that keep us together for a common purpose of realizing a greener future. We cannot repeat ourselves for a call of a flow of $100 billion per annum as a new collective quantified goal, time and again, when scientists' reports are clear on what needs to be done and the costs associated thereon. We call upon developed countries to be honest to themselves and to be also to this very multilateral process. It is common knowledge that climate finance is fundamental for the pathways towards a greener future, yet we are delaying to deliver on it. Therefore, we call for a balanced outcome on climate finance, which takes into account the fact that without adequate and predictable financial resources, no meaningful climate action can take place. NDCs will remain unimplemented, and the catastrophic impact of climate change will take effect in a severity and frequency as temperature continues to rise. We therefore call on developing countries to respect Article 4 of the UNFCCC and Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement. These provisions must not be turned into loans. We are not here to negotiate for loans and grants, but we are here to ask for a fair and just compensation on the climate damage caused by those who committed environmental crimes. As affected countries, we continue to contribute nothing to the cause of global warming. We will work tirelessly to seek justice on this. I would like to conclude with a few words by saying that wisdom without action is meaningless and useless. We need to act and act now in Baku to deliver on ambitious climate finance, a goal that makes a greener world possible in a fair and just manner. Let justice prevail. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mircea Feșe, Minister of Environment, Waters and Forests of Romania. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the end of 2024, a year marked by unprecedented records of extreme events. It is obvious that these are no longer exceptions, but are becoming an integral part of our reality, becoming nature itself. The scientific community continues to warn us that exceeding the 1.5-degree thresholds leads to an oppressive reality. It means economic, social, and political insecurity, including climate migration. These situations we must avoid at all costs. That is why we must act as one, leaving aside differences and focusing on what is essential: preserving a world where current and future generations can live. The time for inactivity is long gone, and the implementation of climate actions must take priority over political differences. Ladies and gentlemen, the implementation of climate actions should be perceived by all of us as an opportunity for economic development, social inclusion, ensuring security, well-being, and peace. Romania, together with all EU member states, is firmly committed to implementing the necessary measures to address climate change, both in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to its adverse effects. Romania has a long-term strategy to achieve climate neutrality by mid-century at the latest. Specific sectoral measures are included in the National Energy and Climate Plan, designed to ensure the correct trajectory towards neutrality and the implementation of the EU-level NDC for 2030. We have also approved this summer a new national strategy for adaptation to climate change, with a dedicated action plan containing specific measures for 13 economic and social sectors. Fellow ministers, we are well aware that implementing both emission reduction and adaptation measures involves various challenges, including financial ones. At COP29, the negotiation of the NCQG is complex and reflects current global tensions, but also opportunities for international collaboration to address one of the greatest challenges of our times, mobilizing sufficient resources to fulfill the goals of the Paris Agreement. The involvement of all entities is crucial in delivering on our climate ambitions. To this end, in Romania, we are currently prioritizing the development of partnerships with the private sector on energy, transport, and industry decarbonization. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge everyone to work on awareness, education, and inclusive participation for a just transition, for effectively managing climate change, and for maintaining alive the goal of the Paris Agreement. Transparency remains a fundamental pillar at all stages of this process. Failure is not an option for anyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and the Environment of Singapore. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, the first global stocktake highlighted the urgency of the climate crisis and that bold actions are needed to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees C. Amidst increasing geopolitical tensions, UNFCCC's role in uniting the world in reaching our collective climate goal is even more vital. Singapore reaffirms our commitment to working with all parties and partners to advance global climate action. Despite being an alternative energy disadvantaged city-state, we have expanded solar deployment by 5-fold since 2019 and are improving energy efficiency across all sectors. But climate change transcends borders, and cross-border collaborations are crucial. Singapore is partnering the global community to find innovative solutions. We are working with our neighbors to realize an ASEAN power grid, a critical enabler of our region's energy transition. Globally, we are partnering other ports to pioneer the use of low-carbon fuels in decarbonizing the shipping sector. We contribute to building knowledge and capabilities in the global community in climate mitigation and adaptation through the Singapore Cooperation Programme and climate research. We are also enabling finance. For many developing countries, financing is what hinders ambition from being translated into action. The new collective quantified goal NCQG is critical in COP29. We hope that we will deliver an ambitious, effective, and fit-for-purpose NCQG outcome, respecting the principles of Paris Agreement. Singapore is fully committed to doing our part in line with the Paris Agreement to mobilize private capital towards supporting Asia's transition. Last year, we launched the FAST-P, or Financing Asia's Transition Partnership. At COP29, we pledged up to US $500 million to crowd in other concessional capital from public, private, and philanthropic sources of an equal amount. This will catalyze a much larger amount of private capital to support green and transition projects. Carbon credits are another innovative source of finance. We are working with partners to develop a well-functioning and credible carbon markets, including through the co-facilitation of the Paris Agreement Article 6 negotiations and building a pipeline of high-quality, high-integrity credits. Mr. President, Singapore affirms our full support for your leadership and the UNFCCC. We are committed to take action. We have submitted our first biannual transparency report and will submit our 2035 NDCs on time. Together with our friends and partners, let us turn our climate ambitions into reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Fu. Thank you, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Mrs. Bungkam Vorachit, Minister of Natural Resources and Environment of Laos People's Democratic Republic. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Lapidia extends our congratulations to the government of Azerbaijan for hosting COP29. Currently, climate change has caused the highest temperature record and more extreme weather events, leading to significant economic human loss. Lapidia has experienced with tropical storm caused widespread flooding throughout the country, severely impact infrastructure, house and farmlands. Lapidia is working to reduce emissions by 60% by 2030 through emission reduction programs, forest management, low carbon agriculture, clean energy, and clean energy efficiency. This year, we have advanced our national climate change agenda by implementing our national strategy on climate change and developing our national adaptation plan. The country aims for net zero emission by 2050, aligned with the global efforts to limit climate change and carbon footprint. With the long-term low-emission development strategy, BTR and carbon decree, we are ready to engage in the global carbon market and align climate action with sustainable development goals. Mr. President, at the 2024 ASEAN Chair, Lapidia collaborated with ASEAN member states to draft the ASEAN Joint Statement on Climate Change for COP29. These statements emphasize equity and various responsibility, encourages COP28 outcome, and urges developed countries to speed up financial pledges and support for technology and capacity building. It also calls for more climate finance, especially for vulnerable communities, and easy access for international climate funds, focusing on the loss and damage funds. Mr. President, despite progress, significant work remains. Turning pledges into action is challenging, especially for vulnerable countries. Climate change adaptation needs substantial investment and technology. International support is crucial to achieving the goals. In this connection, we anticipate COP29 outcomes to establish fair climate fund distribution, simplify access, and fully operationalize the loss and damage funds. This financial support is essential for vulnerable countries to move towards a sustainable and climate resilient future. To this end, Lapidia reaffirmed its unwavering commitment to climate action and stand ready to collaborate with all parties to combat climate change. Together, we can build a prosperous, sustainable, and resilient future for our planet. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Chalemchai Srion, Minister of Natural Resources and Environment of Thailand. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
ท่านประธานท่านผู้ทรงเกียรติท่านผู้แทนประเทศภาคีกรอบอนุสัญญาในโอกาสแรกผมขอขอบคุณรัฐบาลแห่งสหรัฐอาเซอร์ไบจันสำหรับการเป็นเจ้าภาพการประชุมCOP29ในครั้งนี้ณกรุงบากูซึ่งมีความงดงามทางประวัติศาสตร์และสถาปัตยกรรมท่ามกลางช่วงเวลาสำคัญอย่างยิ่งที่ประชาชนชาวประชาคมโลกจะต้องมีความเป็นอันหนึ่งอันเดียวกันเพื่อการเปลี่ยนผ่านที่เป็นธรรมในการบรรลุเป้าหมายความตกลงปารีสประเทศไทยเป็นหนึ่งในประเทศที่ได้รับผลกระทบจากการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศมากที่สุดที่ผ่านมาเราเผชิญภัยพิบัติด้านสภาพอากาศอย่างต่อเนื่องถ้าอากาศร้อนที่มีอุณหภูมิสูงถึง 43 องศาเซลเซียสรวมถึงเกิดพายุรุนแรงจนเกิดน้ำท่วมน้ำป่าไหลหลากและดินโคลนถล่มทำให้เกิดความสูญเสียหายต่อชีวิตทรัพย์สินของประชาชนและการเจริญเติบโตทางเศรษฐกิจอย่างร้ายแรงรวมถึงการสูญเสียความหลากหลายทางชีวภาพเช่นหญ้าทะเลซึ่งส่งผลต่อการลดลงของประชากรพยูนมากกว่า 50% ในรอบ 6 ปีในขณะที่ประเทศไทยปล่อยก๊าซเรือนกระจกไม่ถึง 1% ของโลกซึ่งเรามุ่งมั่นยกระดับการลดก๊าซเรือนกระจกอย่างเต็มความสามารถบนหลักการแห่งความรับผิดชอบร่วมกันในระดับที่แตกต่างและคำนึงถึงความสามารถของประเทศเพื่อบรรลุเป้าหมายการลดก๊าซเรือนกระจกตามกรอบ NDC 2030 ให้ได้ 222 ล้านตันคาร์บอนไดออกไซด์เทียบเท่านะครับจากการดำเนินการ 5 สาขาได้แก่พลังงานคมนาคมการจัดการของเสียชุมชนและน้ำเสียอุตสาหกรรมกระบวนการอุตสาหกรรมและการใช้ผลิตภัณฑ์และการเกษตรโดยมีแผนปฏิบัติการที่ชัดเจนเพื่อรองรับการดำเนินการที่เป็นรูปธรรมท่านประธานจากการประเมินสถานการณ์การดำเนินการระดับโลกพบว่าสิ่งที่พวกเราทำอยู่ยังไม่เพียงพอต่อการควบคุมอุณหภูมิเฉลี่ยของโลกได้ดังนั้นประเทศไทยจึงวางเป้าหมายการลดก๊าซเรือนกระจกให้เพิ่มสูงขึ้นโดยเร่งดำเนินการไปสู่ NDC 3.0 เพื่อลดการปล่อยก๊าซเรือนกระจกจากทุกภาคส่วนของการพัฒนาเศรษฐกิจให้ต่ำกว่า 270 ล้านตันคาร์บอนไดออกไซด์เทียบเท่าภายในปี 2015 และปีฐาน 2019 ซึ่งจะมุ่งสู่การลดก๊าซเรือนกระจกจากค่าการปล่อยจริงควบคู่ไปกับการดำเนินการแผนลงทุนสีเขียวเพื่อรองรับ NDC 3.0 รวมถึงเร่งเพิ่มการดูดกลับของภาคป่าไม้ที่ 120 ล้านตันคาร์บอนไดออกไซด์เทียบเท่าภายในปีคศ 2037 สำหรับการปรับตัวต่อการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศซึ่งมีความสำคัญอย่างยิ่งเรามุ่งเน้นบูรณาการแผนการปรับตัวระดับชาติให้เชื่อมโยงกับการดำเนินการระดับท้องถิ่นอย่างเป็นรูปธรรมใน 6 สาขาได้แก่การจัดการน้ำการเกษตรและความมั่นคงทางอาหารการท่องเที่ยวการสาธารณสุขการจัดการทรัพยากรธรรมชาติการตั้งถิ่นฐานและความมั่นคงของมนุษย์โดยเฉพาะการพัฒนาระบบเตือนภัยล่วงหน้าเพื่อจัดการปัญหาการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศให้กับประชาชนระดับพื้นที่รวมไปถึงการเร่งฟื้นฟูและคุ้มครองความหลากหลายชีวภาพทางทะเลและชายฝั่งท่านประธานการขับเคลื่อนนโยบายสู่การปฏิบัติทุกระดับเป็นไปอย่างมีระบบและบูรณาการเป็นหัวใจสำคัญในการบรรลุเป้าหมายที่ท้าทายภายใต้ความตกลงปารีสเราจึงผลักดันกลไกความเป็นหุ้นส่วนภาครัฐเอกชนและประชาชนโดยได้มีการจัดประชุมการขับเคลื่อนการปฏิบัติงานด้านเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศของไทย 2024 เพื่อเสริมสร้างการรับรู้ความเข้าใจและนำไปสู่ การเสริมพลังความร่วมมือจากทุกภาคส่วนพร้อมกันนี้เรายังเร่งผลักดันพระราชบัญญัติการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศเพื่อสร้างการดำเนินการอย่างสมดุลทั้งด้านกลไกราคาคาร์บอนและกองทุนการเงินเพื่อสภาพภูมิอากาศเพื่อขับเคลื่อนประเทศไทยให้สามารถพัฒนาเศรษฐกิจและสังคมคาร์บอนต่ำที่มีภูมิคุ้มกันต่อการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพอากาศอย่างยั่งยืนท่านประธานครับผมหวังเป็นอย่างยิ่งว่าการประชุมครั้งนี้เราจะได้ข้อตัดสินใจในการระดมเงินตามเป้าหมายการทางการเงินใหม่รวมถึงจะได้ความชัดเจนเกี่ยวกับกฎเกณฑ์แนวทางและข้อกำหนดในการเข้าถึงกองทุนเพื่อความสูญเสียและความเสียหายเพื่อช่วยให้ประเทศกำลังพัฒนาและประเทศกลุ่มเปราะบางมีขีดความสามารถในการขับเคลื่อนดำเนินการได้อย่างรวดเร็วและเต็มประสิทธิภาพตลอดจนมีศักยภาพในการเผชิญความเสี่ยงจากผลกระทบการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศได้อย่างเหมาะสมผมเชื่อว่าการอยู่ร่วมกันของทุกคนณที่แห่งนี้จะเป็นห่วงเวลาสำคัญในการกำหนดทิศทางการดำเนินการงานสร้างกิจอันเปลี่ยนผ่านไปสู่ความสำเร็จตามเป้าหมายของความตกลงปารีสได้อย่างแข็งแกร่งและมั่นคงสุดท้ายนี้ผมขอเรียกร้องให้ประชาคมโลกมีความเป็นอันหนึ่งอันเดียวกันและแสดงความมุ่งมั่นอย่างจริงใจที่จะร่วมกันรักษาโลกใบนี้ให้คงอยู่เพื่อให้เราทุกคนและอนุชนรุ่นต่อไปที่พวกเรารักได้อาศัยอยู่อย่างยั่งยืนตลอดไปขอบคุณครับ
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Robert Bouvier Torterolo, Minister of Environment of Uruguay. Su Excelencia, tiene la palabra.
Señor Presidente, en primer lugar agradezco a la Presidencia de la COP29 por recibirnos en esta hermosa ciudad y generar las condiciones adecuadas para avanzar en este importante proceso multilateral. Uruguay reafirma su compromiso con la Convención y su Acuerdo de París. La crisis climática que enfrentamos requiere una acción global coordinada, basada en el principio de responsabilidades comunes pero diferenciadas. Este desafío nos involucra a todos y debemos actuar de manera conjunta para proteger tanto a nuestras poblaciones como a los ecosistemas que sustentan nuestra vida. Llegamos a esta COP con la esperanza de alcanzar una decisión ambiciosa sobre el nuevo objetivo colectivo cuantificado de financiamiento. Esto es fundamental para los países en desarrollo y es clave para fortalecer la credibilidad del sistema multilateral. Solo a través de financiamiento adecuado podremos implementar las acciones necesarias para mitigar y adaptarnos al cambio climático. Esperamos también decisiones robustas en materia de adaptación. Uruguay ya cuenta con 4 planes nacionales de adaptación, enfocados en la producción agropecuaria, costas, ciudades e infraestructura y energía. A pesar de los logros alcanzados, necesitamos avanzar más en su implementación, lo cual dependerá en gran medida de la disponibilidad de recursos accesibles y sostenibles para financiar esas acciones. Nuestro país, pequeño en superficie y con una población mayoritariamente costera, tiene una economía agroindustrial y de servicio, lo que nos hace altamente vulnerables al cambio climático. Por ello, nuestras políticas climáticas se basan en el respeto a los derechos humanos, la preservación de los ecosistemas, la equidad de género y una transición justa para todos. Aunque Uruguay emite solo el 0,05% de los gases de efecto invernadero globales, hemos implementado medidas significativas de mitigación. Más del 95% de nuestra matriz eléctrica proviene de fuentes renovables y estamos avanzando hacia una segunda transición energética basada en hidrógeno verde. También lanzamos la Política Nacional de Movilidad Urbana Sostenible y hemos reducido sustancialmente las emisiones en la producción ganadera, demostrando que sostenibilidad y productividad son compatibles. En diciembre de este año tendremos nuestro primer informe bienal de transparencia, mostrando nuestros avances y desafíos. En febrero del 25 presentaremos nuestra tercera contribución determinada a nivel nacional, con nuevos compromisos concretos para la acción climática que marcarán un paso adelante en nuestras metas. Nuestro compromiso con la acción climática se respalda con acciones concretas, como la emisión en el 2022 de un bono soberano vinculado a indicadores de cambio climático y un préstamo con el Banco Mundial que premia con una reducción en la tasa de interés el cumplimiento de nuestros objetivos climáticos nacionales. En un contexto global complejo, Uruguay cree firmemente en el multilateralismo como la mejor vía para enfrentar los desafíos ambientales. Subrayamos, sin embargo, la urgencia de cumplir y potenciar con los compromisos internacionales de financiamiento, garantizando recursos accesibles y sostenibles para los países de desarrollo que son los más vulnerables al cambio climático. Hacemos un llamado a las instituciones financieras internacionales para que amplíen las herramientas que promuevan la acción climática con verdadera ambición. Por último, saludamos a la próxima COP que se realiza en Brasil y confiamos en que esta semana se alcancen resultados sustantivos que beneficien a toda la humanidad. La cooperación global no es solo una responsabilidad compartida, es nuestra esperanza para enfrentar uno de los mayores desafíos de nuestro tiempo. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Excelencia. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Daouda Ngom, Minister of Environment and Ecological Transition of Senegal. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Monsieur le secrétaire exécutif de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques, Monsieur le président de la COP29, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, permettez-moi d'abord, au nom de son Excellence, M. Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye, président de la République du Sénégal, d'adresser mes vives félicitations et remerciements à son Excellence, M. Ilham Aliyev, président de la République d'Azerbaïdjan, pour l'hospitalité et l'organisation parfaite de cette 29e COP sur les changements climatiques. Je félicite M. Antonio Guterres, secrétaire général des Nations Unies, pour son engagement pour l'atteinte des objectifs cruciaux de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur le changement climatique et l'accord de Paris. Nous sommes réunis ici avec une ferme volonté de renforcer la coopération, de rehausser les ambitions climatiques afin de ralentir, voire neutraliser la tendance au réchauffement de la planète. La crise climatique est une question à choix unique. Sauver la planète pour sauver l'humanité. Il n'existe point d'alternative. Il faut agir dans l'urgence. Le monde est affecté de tous bords par des événements climatiques extrêmes, aux conséquences mortelles et catastrophiques. Les inondations soudaines, les crues dévastatrices en cours dans les pays riverains des bassins des fleuves Sénégal, Gambie et Niger, en Afrique de l'Ouest, ont détruit et déplacé des milliers de populations. L'élévation du niveau de la mer avec l'érosion côtière menace sérieusement nos pays, nos infrastructures et écosystèmes. Le Sénégal a ces derniers mois mobilisé via son budget 30 milliards de francs CFA pour minimiser les pertes liées aux inondations et accompagner les sinistrés tout en faisant face à des pertes d'habitat sur le long de ces 718 km de côte. Croyez-moi, Excellence, devoir planifier un développement socio-économique inclusif et durable avec des investissements pouvant être annihilés par un événement climatique extrême constitue une épreuve de Sisyphe à laquelle les pays en développement sont désormais soumis. Nos pays sont obligés de s'endetter pour faire face à des pertes et des préjudices qui adviennent régulièrement. Cette situation n'est pas juste et doit être corrigée dans la nouvelle décision de la finance. L'heure est à l'action. Les finances et leur accessibilité doivent être simples et rapides pour la mise en œuvre des CDN, des plans nationaux d'adaptation et autres initiatives. Mesdames et messieurs, le chemin parcouru depuis Rio 92 à Baku est long, parsemé de défis, mais ces 32 années d'endurance nous persuadent que la crise climatique devra être gérée dans l'épreuve de conjoncture, rendant notre mission plus difficile, mais pas impossible. L'adoption du Fonds spécial sur les pertes et préjudices a germé une lueur d'espoir. Nous comptons sur son renforcement durant la session dédiée à la finance climatique. Le Sénégal invite instamment toutes les parties à la mobilisation pour des décisions fortes sur le financement climatique adéquat et accessible, basé sur la subvention adéquate pour l'adaptation, les pertes et dommages, en vue d'aller vers une transition juste, équitable et résiliente, tout en donnant une rémunération adéquate aux transactions carbone venant des pays en développement par la fixation d'un prix plancher. Mesdames et messieurs, agissons vite et bien pour ne laisser en rade aucun pays. L'avenir radieux que nous voulons
et la survie de l'espèce humaine en dépendent. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Balarabe Abbas Lawal, Minister of Environment of Nigeria. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, I'm pleased to congratulate you on your election as the President of this 29th Conference of Parties. The Nigerian delegation would like to assure you of our support and commitment towards achieving good outcome for this conference. We further extend our gratitude to the President of Azerbaijan, His Excellency Ilham Aliyev, and the good people of the Republic of Azerbaijan for hosting the first COP in the Caucasus region. Nigeria is one of the countries of the world most vulnerable to adverse impact of climate change. There are increasing evidences that Nigeria is experiencing widespread challenges attributed to climate change and its impact. This directly constitutes severe limitation to the achievement and progress of our sustainable development and associated aspirations. To address this concern, Nigeria is intensifying the implementation of policies and plans to cut greenhouse emissions, increase resilience, and include climate change solutions into our national planning process. Nigeria is making investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency, afforestation, transportation, and other climate-friendly initiatives. Almost 10 years after the Paris Agreement, the world stands at a defining juncture on the transition from fossil fuels. Nigeria has joined the world in deployment and adaptation of several interrelated technologies, especially that of renewable energy sources, such as compressed natural gas, CNG, mobility system, and electrification of technologies such as electric vehicles. The country is committed to implementing its energy transition plan and long-term emission development strategy with the goal of increasing energy efficiency. We are open to collaborating and partnering to expand our proportion of renewable energy. Further, Nigeria is working towards achieving net zero emissions by 2060 and enhancing its national determined contribution NDC. Accordingly, Nigeria has developed its NDC's implementation framework and look forward to partnering on its delivery. In our stride toward reducing sustainable climate changes, we are incorporating adaptation measures into policies, programs, and actions. An adaptation compact with project pipelines exist to help us build the much-needed resilience. We are open to partnering in this regard. Also, Nigerian Adaptation Plan, NAP, is being finalized to make Nigeria more resilient to its development priorities and system. To enable countries withstand climate change impact, Nigeria hereby advocates for the provision of the means of implementation to achieve global goal on adaptation. In our effort to reduce our carbon footprint and achieve our national objective, we have developed a framework and strategy for participation in the Article 6 carbon market. In 2023, an intergovernmental committee on carbon market activation was formed to oversee the carbon efficiency in Nigeria. Nigeria aligns with the rest of Africa in demanding greater, easier access to international finance, including grant and concessional loans to support mitigation and adaptation efforts. We stress the need to significantly scale up adaptation finance to enable developing countries to accelerate adaptation and build resilience. We also urge for accelerated effort to operationalize the loss and damage fund to mitigate the damaging impact of climate change globally. Nigeria further aligned with the Harare Declaration by African Ministers of Health to take action on the impact of climate change. Mr. President, addressing climate change is a common and shared responsibility. This COP presents all of us another useful opportunity to move from rhetorics to concrete action. The world must act now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Mrs. Valentine Uwamaliya, Minister of Environment of Rwanda. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
COP29 President, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express our gratitude and appreciation to the government of Azerbaijan for presiding over and hosting COP29. I also thank the people of Azerbaijan for your warm hospitality accorded to us and to all our delegations in this beautiful city of Baku. Climate change impacts are a threat to our agriculture, water resources, biodiversity, and human health. In Rwanda, according to the recent Country Climate and Development Report, climate change costs 5 to 7% of our GDP annually. This is a significant impact on our economy. Rwanda needs 11 billion USD to build resilience and reduce our GHG emission at the scale of 38% by 2030. To address the above challenge, Rwanda has placed climate resilience at the heart of our development agenda. Rwanda has consistently set ambitious climate targets, and while we are revising our nationally determined contributions, we will once again raise our ambition from the baseline of 38% reduction by 2030 as pledged before. By 2050, Rwanda aims to be a climate neutral nation. COP29 President. COP29 should deliver ambitious, balanced, fair, and just outcomes that set the world on a course to effectively address the climate change on several fronts, including adaptation, loss and damage, finance, and mitigation. Such an outcome should be guided by the best available science, principles, and provisions of the Convention on the Paris Agreement. Countries must set a new collective goal for climate finance that meets the needs of developing countries now and into the future, who are particularly vulnerable to climate change. The quality of finance is particularly critical for African countries. There is need to address the unsustainable debt burden, high cost of capital, and increasing use of non-concessional finance instruments that hinder the ability of African countries to achieve their climate and development goals. The new collective quantified goal framework should therefore address the types of finance instruments and their relative contribution to the quantum with a clear share of public grant finance. Indeed, the fund for responding to loss and damage needs to be fully operationalized and resourced to support the developing countries to respond effectively to these losses and damages, and also prioritizing grant-based and concessional financing is vital. Globally, we need high-emitting nations to do more, to quickly reduce emissions and swiftly move to clean energy. Climate action must be collective. That means working together to share knowledge, experience, and technologies required to build a greener future. In conclusion, Rwanda reiterates its commitment and stands ready to work collaboratively with the international community to implement effective climate solutions that safeguard the well-being of present and future generations. Let us seize this opportunity at COP29 to reinforce our commitment to a sustainable, resilient, and low-carbon future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. On behalf of the conference, I would like to thank you all for your statements. Distinguished delegates, we will now continue with the delivery of national statement today at 3 p.m., 15 hours, in this plenary. With this, I declare this joint meeting of the COP, CMP, and the CMA adjourned.